The following Monday, I was called in to have a meeting with the sheriff. I could tell that it was a serious conversation. There was very little in the way of jokes and jabs. Instead, I was asked politely to sit down. I knew there was going to be trouble. Sheriff Mason leaned back in his chair with a sigh. "I heard you almost got Nick killed," he said, "and he ain't happy about it." He tapped the answering machine on his desk. Who the hell even has one of these anymore? Maybe we ought to deal with the deeper issues first, I countered. Like that thing at the school collecting heads. You think we ought to do something about that, huh? Well, little Miss Krispy Kreme, there's a whole lot of sugar going around this town, and I ain't got enough Pac-Mans to gobble it all. He got out of his chair and painstakingly walked around his desk, sitting down next to me. I could smell the beard oil from his walrus mustache. You ain't even scratched the surface yet, but you gotta calm down. And for you to calm down, I gotta pull you off patrol. Nick was paired up with a twitchy guy named Reggie. Reggie was in his early 40s and had the shape of a badly drawn stick figure with a receding hairline. Apparently he had been working dispatch for 3 years, and now I was supposed to take over his position. I was to work on the phones back at the station for the foreseeable future. I was put at a desk with a slightly newer computer, a headset, and a chatty coworker. The first time that I met Charlotte, or Charlie for short, she was handling something that I can only dream of understanding. The conversation went a little something like this. Sir, I don't know how many arms you've found. You put them right back where you find them. And don't go planting them like trees. That's disrespectful." Charlie was energetic, like a cooped-up parakeet. She had trouble sitting still and wandered back and forth whenever she could afford to stretch her legs. She looked to be no more than 20, maybe 25. But she was closer to 40 and had 2 kids back home. The only thing that kinda gave it away was her nails. You could tell that she used her hands a lot. She introduced me to a lot of the basic systems, how to see and handle phone queues, what to take down on reports, standard protocols, that kind of stuff. I spent the first few days just watching her do the job and then slowly getting easier calls redirected to me. Now, while we were officially taking calls for things like tips and wellness checks, we also got calls from the duck people that the sheriff was working for. We had simple instructions when dealing with them. Don't ask questions. We were to do as we were told, and if we couldn't, we patched them through to the sheriff. As March dipped into April, I was getting pretty good at it. I had effectively replaced Reggie, who I could see drop by the station every now and then with Nick following suit. I tried to talk to them a couple of times, but Nick wasn't having it. Reggie seemed like an eager puppy, just happy to get some attention, so every attempt I made to patch things up with Nick got swallowed up. I brought in donuts. Reggie was happy to talk about it, while Nick silently grabbed one in the background. I refilled the coffee machine. Reggie was happy to grab a cup, while Nick filled up his thermos. Every conversation starter I tried got derailed. It was one of those times that prompted my first real conversation with Charlie. It was a dull Tuesday afternoon in between calls. Charlie was busy trying to make sense of her kid's schedule for the week, scratching her head as she scrolled up and down on a second-hand iPad. "What are you doing out here anyway?" she asked. "You killed someone." "Why do you ask?" "Oh, most folks that get here done do some dumb shit they can't take back." "Oh, sorta," I nodded, "but I ain't killed anyone." "You wanted to." "Wanted to what?" "Kill someone." It was a strange question to be asked so casually. I just tilted my head at her, giving her a questioning look. "Look, all I'm saying is that if you gotta get deported to dipshit nowhere, population whatever, you might as well get your money's worth. Whatever you did ought to get you something is all." I shook my head at her. Got me nothing. Charlie lit up with a grin, leaning across the room with her knuckles out, and I tapped them. Screwed if we do, screwed if we don't, huh? Most of the calls I got were completely harmless. Somebody locking themselves out of their house, a worried neighbor spotting a dog in a car. I even got the cat stuck in a tree call once. But there were a couple of strange calls too. Most of them came from the dock, the strange men in black kind of people that Sheriff Mason had called in at the start of the year. One time they called in to check if anyone had reported any strange aerial sightings, giant birds or insects, stuff like that. When I told them that we hadn't had anything like that, they hung up on me. I got a few calls like that, most of them harmless or nonsensical, but given the kind of calls that we could get from ordinary folks in Tomskog, it wasn't that unusual. Things took a pretty drastic turn when I got what seemed like a harmless call. By then, Charlie wasn't patching them through to me or routing them. We had a 50-50 split on calls. It gave her more time to check her Facebook. I got a call from an older woman that I had never talked to before. I didn't recognize the name, but I could see she was registered to a Tomskog address. My son got me 8 rubber ducks for my bathroom, but when I walked in this morning, there were 12, she explained. I'm sorry, what? There are too many rubber ducks, is that it? Yes, I don't know where they came from. I think someone broke in. I see. I looked over at Charlie. Her ears must have perked up at rubber duck. She mouthed a silent, "What the hell?" at me, and I just shrugged. Ma'am, unless this is some sort of immediate threat, I'll ask to see if a patrol can stop by to look for damages later today. Please take some time to check the locks on your windows, all right? Oh, I'm sorry. The old woman laughed. I'm sure it sounds ridiculous, but I've checked again and again and there's too many of them. All right, we'll see what we can do. You have a nice day now. According to our systems, one of our units was available. Seeing as how there was nothing else to do at the moment, I tagged them on the radio. Unit 115, this is dispatch. Do you copy? Nick here, what do you got? I was a bit startled. I hadn't talked to the guy in weeks. Hey Nick, I continued. You doing all right? Yeah, he cut me short. What's the stitch? I explained the situation to him. He could barely keep himself from laughing, but I guess he figured anything was better than babysitting the Digmans on yet another stakeout. So I got him and Reggie to check the old woman and her mysterious rubber ducks. Now, this seemed innocent at the time, just a fun anecdote. I spent most of that day talking to Charlie about everything and nothing. She smoked at her desk, but she sat next to a window and was kind enough to tilt her head out when she exhaled. It was a nasty habit, but at least she smoked menthols. She loved the rubber duck story and had all kinds of follow-up questions about it. Her kids would definitely hear about it at family dinner. Guaranteed. And then she got a call. It was probably 3, maybe 4 hours after the rubber duck call. I could tell that it was serious. Charlie put out her cigarette and leaned forward taking notes. She was talking to the duck. They were the only ones who called in that Charlie never questioned. As soon as the call ended, she ran up to the front doors and locked them, and then she started to go down the side of the room, checking that every window was closed and secured. Check the windows, we gotta lock up. What did they say? They said they'd get back to us, but until they do, we gotta lock up and make sure nothing gets in. We checked every room and made sure that it was all locked up. There was no one else around, just me and Charlie. It was that time of day when the sun started to set, freezing an icy sheet over the melting snow outside, giving a crackling noise to every footstep. Temperatures were dipping fast, and even inside the station we had put on jackets to keep the heat up. The radiators hadn't worked for months. I decided to power through. The next call that came through was routed to me. It was one of the duck folks. You could tell by the extension on their phone. As soon as I clicked on that receiver, the voice on the other end came through.
And did you secure the station?
Yes, we locked all of it.
You need to take inventory. Everything larger than a fist, write it all down. Every single item, even if it's nailed to the wall.
That's gonna take hours.
Then it'll have to take hours.
He snapped back.
And when you're done, you're gonna do it again. And if a single thing on that list is out of line, you call me on this number immediately.
If there's one lesson that I'd taken away from my run-in at the high school with Nick, it was not to stick my nose where it didn't belong, and this seemed like one of those times. I dry swallowed my questions. All right, I said, but we're getting overtime. Charlie and I armed ourselves with notepads and divvied up the rooms. She'd take the bullpen and front desk, and I'd take the break room. She'd take the bathrooms, and I'd take the locker room. And then we had 2 interview rooms, the sheriff's office, an evidence room, and a conference room. This was going to take hours, possibly long into the night, especially if they were serious about us doing it twice. I was halfway through checking the break room when I saw one of the squad cars coming back. It wasn't Nick or Reggie, but 2 of the others. They stopped outside, gave us a curious look through the windows, and called out to me.
Y'all doing all right in there?
Yeah, I nodded. Peachy. There's some weird shit going on, they continued. Check if something's out of place. But why? I don't know, they shrugged. But we got a stab victim who says the last thing he remembers is noticing that he had too many radios. I don't know what to make of it. You don't get stabbed having too many radios. I don't know what to tell ya. It was dull work. Dull. Charlie put on some of her playlists through the speaker system just to make the hours pass by. I didn't take her for a honky-tonk kind of woman, but by the second Dolly Parton album, I figured she wasn't sarcastic. Noting every little thing, only to know that I had to cross-reference it later, was exhausting. It's one thing to have a lot of work to do, but to know you're gonna have to do it again just drains you. I was using a master key to check every locker one by one. I was going on autopilot to the point where I was barely paying attention to what I was looking at, or whose locker I was checking. I was humming along to Backwoods Barbie when something in my brain clicked. I was checking my own locker, running my hands over my jacket. I knew what was in this locker already. There was no point in checking every little bit of it. But taking a step back, something didn't add up. I shook my head, squinted a little, and looked again. I could see my jacket there, one of those brown pilot-like jackets with a ruffled collar, comfiest thing that I had ever owned. But there were 2 of them. There shouldn't be 2 of them. "Charlie," I called out, "come here for a sec." She trotted over, still humming along to the music. She knew every word by heart. "Oh, what's up?" "You see 2 jackets in that locker?" I asked. She walked up to me and checked the locker. She nodded. "Yep, that's 2. "There shouldn't be. That's my jacket. I only have 1 jacket." We just stood there for a bit, staring at the open locker. I couldn't tell which one was which. The jackets were identical. One of them wasn't mine. Charlie was the first to snap out of it, closing the locker with a smack. "Hold it shut," she said. "I'll get the duct tape." We taped up the locker just to be safe, and then we sealed off the entire locker room and retreated to the bullpen. I made the call to the duck while Charlie called back home to tell her family she'd be running late. I got an answer on the first ring. "There's an extra jacket in my locker," I said. "Is that bad?"
"And you didn't put it there?"
"I did not put it there."
"Oh, then it's bad."
The voice on the other end sighed.
"Have you found anything else?"
"Not yet, no."
"Good,"
he continued.
"Settle in one room and lock the rest."
"Why? What's going on?" The question just slipped out of me. I knew better than to ask the duck for clarification, but I couldn't help myself. There were a few seconds of silence. The voice came back a little lower, more thoughtful.
"And did you have any coffee today?"
What does that have to?
It's relevant. Did you have any coffee today?
Yeah, at lunch.
And do you take milk, sugar?
Well, both, yeah.
And you're feeling okay?
I looked down at myself as if expecting to see something unusual. I was fine, of course. Yeah, I said. I'm fine.
Well, then we can eliminate one factor. The most probable issue here is a flare-up of something that shouldn't be here. Something must have provoked them. There's gonna be a lot of them popping up around town tonight. But if we're lucky, they might pass us by.
You make it sound like bad weather.
There are similarities.
He sighed.
Now stay by your station. We're switching to secure channels.
And Charlie and I locked it all, just to make sure we taped the edges. We ran out of duct tape and had to resort to packing tape and evidence tape. Soon the entire station looked like a crime scene. Charlie and I hunkered down in the bullpen, the room where we spent most of our time. About an hour later, the power went out. It's a strange feeling watching a familiar location through a new light. The bullpen usually had these sterile fluorescent lamps. I had never seen the station in the dark before. These things were always on. Charlie and I checked our flashlights, sending bright beams swaying across the room. The speakers went silent, giving Dolly a rest for now. Oh, it might be the breakers, Charlie said. I could go look. You think that's a good idea? Nah, she sighed, but I could do it. I bet you could. We stayed put. When there was nothing left inside to grab our attention, we turned outwards. We could see buildings down the street were still powered, so this had to be something local. Charlie was probably right about it being a breaker problem, maybe a burnt fuse. But we were not about to test the duck and their recommendations. We were staying put and waiting for the cavalry. And time passed slower than usual. I was a bit worked up and hours started to feel like days. The time was about 9 p.m. when I snapped to attention as Charlie called me over. She pointed out the window, shining her flashlight on something. A rocking horse. A red rocking horse, one of those old-timey toys that kids used to get. It was just standing there in the middle of the snow. And that wasn't there before, she said. And unless I'm missing out on some TikTok prank shit, that has no earthly business being there. Yeah, but it's just a toy. Is it? We looked at it for a couple of minutes, shining our lights at it from different angles. Sure, it was just a toy, but somebody must have put it there. Toys didn't move on their own. And that thought made those lifeless white eyes all the more menacing, as the wind slowly pushed it into a gentle sway. Charlie and I tried to keep it cool, but I could tell she wasn't okay. Maybe she just needed a cigarette. As the clock reached 10 p.m., she had to take a bathroom break. We didn't know what to look for, and we had sealed off the bathrooms, but if you gotta go, you gotta go. I stood guard outside. A couple of minutes passed, and then she came back out. Screw it, I'm having a smoke. Following her back to the bullpen, she removed some of the tape from a window and cracked it open. The evidence tape fluttered in the wind like a dancing ribbon. Looking outside, I could see that the rocking horse was gone. Charlie didn't seem all too bothered by it. I started to doubt myself. I mean, maybe I was just looking in the wrong place. Charlie cracked the window a bit further and lit a cigarette, leaning back in her chair. I sat back down at my desk, grabbing a couple of Tic Tacs from the top drawer. But as I looked back up at Charlie, something tickled my brain. She blew the smoke right into the room. The last time she had smoked, she leaned her head out of the window. She smiled a little as she noticed me looking her way. She raised her golden and white pack at me. You want one? I don't smoke. Right, she nodded. Fair enough. She was still doing it. Something about her demeanor was different. I thought back on my locker and the 2 jackets I had seen. There could be 2 of something. Could that go for people? I excused myself and made a hasty retreat to the bathroom. And Charlie shot out of her seat, flicking her cigarette across the room. "Hey," she called out. "Hey, wait." I ignored her and I entered the bathroom, and as I did, I looked back at Charlie through a sliver in the closing door. She looked taller, and her eyes had a tint of blue. As I closed and locked the door, I heard a muffled laugh, and then a couple of footsteps, and then nothing. The bathroom was just 2 stalls and a sink. Both doors were closed, and I moved past the first stall and then stopped. There was a strange noise. And doubling back, I could see that I had stepped in blood, leaving red prints on the textured floor. I opened the first stall door to find Charlie splayed out on the floor. She was bleeding but alive. She was clutching her chest and losing color, taking shallow breaths. It looked like she had punctured a lung. That would explain how she hadn't been able to call for help. I didn't even want to consider what this might mean and what I had just talked to outside. "Hey, take it easy," I said, getting down on my knees. "Take it easy, I got this, you're good." You, Charlie wheezed. "You were already in here." "It wasn't me, Charlie," I assured her, "and that ain't you outside." I got a plastic card from my wallet, an organ donor card of all things. Charlie still had a roll of duct tape. I had Charlie move her hand from the wound as I opened her shirt. It was just a small puncture wound no bigger than a pencil. I put the plastic card over the wound, taping the sides. That way air could go out on exhale, but it would be sealed on the intake. That ought to give her some more time. I helped her sit up with her back against the toilet to relieve pressure from the wound. She wasn't moving anytime soon. "We gotta call for help," I said. "Where's your phone?" Won't work." "Of course it'll work. What are you?" I stopped to think about it. All of the emergency calls in this area were rerouted directly back to us. Usually I'd be able to call directly on the other units, but the duck had changed us to secure channels. That meant a strict chain of communication, accessible to us only through the dispatch station. We could use our radios, but that would just patch us back to our own desks. There was also my phone. Looking through it, I realized that I didn't have many numbers saved. I had the number for the sheriff's office and Nick, but that was it. I gave Nick's number a go, but it went straight to voicemail. I figured he'd either left the thing in his locker or turned it off, or maybe he had blocked me. There was only one real option to call for help. I had to get to my station in the bullpen. Charlie was going to be okay for a little bit. The bleeding wasn't that bad, and as long as she didn't strain herself, she could last a couple of hours. "I'm getting help," I said. "Take slow breaths, stay upright. Use more tape if it gets soaked." It took my cigs," she said. Why the hell?" "Might be a good time to quit," I smiled back. "Never." I got out and closed the door. I got my gun, turned the safety off, readied myself, and left the bathroom. There was no one out there. Holding my flashlight in front of me, I scanned back and forth. "If anybody's out there, you better let me know," I called out. There was no answer. Of course there wasn't. Instead, as I rounded the corner to the bullpen, my jaw dropped. Every single window in the front door was wide open. Evidence tape fluttered in the crosswind. There was a whole bunch of junk at the far end of the room. A trash can, a couple of empty water jugs, a couple of speakers, trash bags, a pile of shoes, just garbage and plenty of it. And there were a handful of items on the desk too that didn't belong. I tried to keep my eyes on all of it, but there was just no way. It was everywhere. I got to my desk and I tapped the space bar, waking up the system. I put on my headset and briefly looked down to find the number for the duck guy that had called earlier, and with a flick of the wrist, I pressed redial. I looked back up as the first tone came through. The moment that he answered, I noticed that red rocking horse right in the middle of the room. There was no way that thing had just been there. Something got in, I said the moment that he picked up. There's junk, like, all over.
Keep your eye on it. Retreat to a safe location.
We got an officer down. Something stabbed her. We need an ambulance.
We got 2 units on the way. Can you hold out?
Maybe. We're holed up in the bathroom.
Get in, keep the doors closed, and wait for us.
I blinked, and the red rocking horse was closer. It was a full 2 feet closer just from the blink of an eye. I jumped back a little. Luckily, my headset was wireless. I had a shitty connection, though. I could barely go to the other room before I got interference. There was no way that I could get all the way to the bathroom without breaking the connection, but I had to try. I backed off, forcing my eyes open. It's one thing to accidentally stare at something until your eyes hurt, but to consciously think about it is excruciating. There's no way. I could feel the salty sweat pearls on my brow grow bigger and drip down the side of my nose. Blank. Everything was different. The rocking horse was gone. Garbage bags were cardboard boxes. The empty water jugs were cinder blocks. The wide open windows invited a howling April wind rushing through the room, grabbing hold of important papers and tossing them across the floor.
They're acting on instinct.
The Duckman continued.
They don't want to be where they are. They want to be where we are, but they can't be. They don't belong, so they try to be us.
What the hell does that mean?
It means they can't find a shape that fits them, so they try to take ours. They're gonna be climbing on top of one another to get to you, and if they do, you're gone. Your friend there probably just got a love tap. They tested you.
My back bumped against the bathroom door as the connection broke. The flashlight flickered, and as it did, the lights came back to a different room. For a brief moment, I was looking at a room of Charlie's. 20, maybe 25 of her, all with the same lifeless expression. All but one, the one with a pack of cigarettes. In the back, a couple of them looked like me. I threw myself inside the bathroom and locked the door. These things were fast. They had been at least 7 feet away, but within the blink of an eye, I had felt something brushing against the back of my head. A couple of strands of hair came loose, slowly twirling to the floor. As I locked the door, something slammed against it, hard enough to make a point, but not hard enough to make the hinges buckle. I opened the stall door to find Charlie struggling. She wasn't worse off, at least. She had her gun up in my direction, but had the trigger discipline not to take the shot. "Ought to knock first," she whispered. "This is private." I got in there with her, closing the stall door and sinking to the floor. I could hear them outside digging through the rooms. They weren't even pretending anymore. They were freely running about. When there had been just one, they had to play along, but now there were dozens. "You seen these before?" I asked. "Seen all kinds, but not that. I remember you asking me about what I did to to get here," I said, "who I had killed." "Yeah. What did you do?" I said it a bit too loud. "What did you do? What did you do? What did you do?" Outside the door, I could hear muffled echoes of my own voice. A torrent of "what did you do?" They were trying to match my voice. My heart rate spiked, sending a cold spike into my fingertips as my heart struggled to remain calm. "I fell in love with the wrong kind of man, but got the right kind of kids," she smiled. "And then things just kinda worked out." "Is he with them now?" I asked. "Or do you got a babysitter?" I was trying to keep her mind focused on something, but the homicidal things outside that door and asking about her family always seemed to brighten her day. "Oh, Keith passed some years ago," she sighed. "And never the fathering type to begin with." "I'm sorry to hear about that." "Oh, the Digmans are a shitty family, I'll tell you that." There was a banging on one of the windows outside. Someone was calling in. I got up and out of the stall, leaning against the bathroom door. It was Nick. It was faint, but it was him. "Use the fire exit through the locker room," he called out. "We gotcha." I put down my gun and hurried back to Charlie. We worked out a plan. It was stupid, but it was all that we had. I carried her bridal style while she watched my back with her service weapon. It was far from ideal, but we didn't have far to go. We had to try. She was only getting weaker. Besides, if Nick and the others were here, maybe they had already secured the back exit. Carrying Charlie, I bent down to have her open the lock. I counted down from 3, feeling my mouth get drier by the syllable. The moment that the mechanism clicked, I kicked the door open. There were voices, some mine, some hers, like a weird echo chamber. I didn't look any other way but the locker room as 4 shots rang out, silencing a handful of voices from the bullpen. I burst through the locker room door. There were jackets and garbage all over the floor, but I kept going. I could feel something sharp scratched against the bottom of my pants, like blunted knives not quite making it through the fabric. Charlie took 2 more shots as something vaguely human stepped out of a locker. I pressed on. Kicking open the fire escape door, I expected an alarm to go off. That thing ought to have been on backup power, but something must have cut it. I went straight out the back, an open area covered in crisp, powder snow. To my surprise, I saw Nick. He was already there. "Keep going, I got you," he said, pointing straight ahead. He had his hand on his hip, ready to draw his weapon. I turned left, heading towards the parking lot, but he stopped me. "No," he interrupted. "Straight ahead, just keep going." I followed his instructions for 20 or so feet, only to realize that I was about to head straight into the woods. There were no roads in this direction, and there was nowhere to park an ambulance. Why would he want me to go there? In the distance, I could see 2 squad vehicles coming down the road, number 114 and 115, the latter being Nick's vehicle. I turned back towards him, still holding Charlie. Without looking away, I whispered at her, "Are there pictures of other officers down at the station?" "Yeah, in the break room," she said. "From that one time we got a Polaroid." Looking a bit closer, this Nick seemed a little off. His hair was longer, his eyes were straighter, and those shades were almost white, like they were still reflecting a light coming from ahead. His voice was a bit off, like the static of an answering machine, and the hand on his hip, well, there was no service weapon there. "That's not Nick." I slowly put down Charlie and raised my weapon. Looking off to the side, I could see somebody coming through the woods. There were footsteps coming from the other side as well. We were being surrounded. Charlie wasn't wasting time. She put 4 shots into the Nick thing and it ran screaming like a popped balloon back into the station. That shrieking noise had some strange cadence to it, grinding like a raw saw blade on my inner ear. It hurt to listen to, making me nauseous. Charlie put 2 more shots into something flanking from our left and then reloaded. I followed her example. We didn't stop for anything. A cardboard box, 2 shots, a barrel, 2 more shots. Everything that was there that shouldn't be there got tapped twice. And then there was me, an identical copy of me, and what I looked like right at this moment, only with a slight tinge of blue to their eyes. It felt like looking into a mirror. She didn't look angry or threatening. She looked content, like she had just stepped out of a shower. She didn't run, she didn't scream. She just casually walked my way, holding up an empty hand to show that she meant no harm. Again, Charlie wasn't having it. 2 shots, chest and head. The image distorted. My face grew long and disjointed as the back curled like a wounded insect. The arm shrunk into dagger-like bone knobs sticking out of what would be the hand joints. As the jaw extended past her midriff, all I could think of was a melting plastic toy. And then it too ran screeching into the wilds. Something got a hold of Charlie. She screamed, and by the time that I turned around, she had been dragged 8 feet. I couldn't tell by what, there was nothing there. She had another puncture wound in her shoulder. She pointed her gun my direction and I dove out of the way. She hit something that was coming up behind me. I crawled back to her on all 4s, ending up back to back so that we could check all directions at once. She was barely breathing. I was having trouble breathing with 2 lungs. I couldn't imagine what she was experiencing with just 1. Her head was swaying back and forth like a bobblehead. "I'm out," she whispered. "I got 8 left," I said. "You see something?" "I don't know, maybe." Another me crawling out of the bushes at full speed on all fours. 2 shots. A Charlie running out of the locker room screeching like a wounded animal. 2 shots. That red rocking horse only 8 feet away. 2 more shots. A strange amalgamation came around the side of the building. It looked like someone had taken the picture of Sheriff Mason and dragged it out. I realized it was probably trying to copy one of the blurry photos in the break room, as I could tell the vague outline of a birthday party hat, but it was all organic. I just looked at it for a while, trying to figure out what it was supposed to be. A badge dragged out across the chest like an oval membrane, our blue and black uniform fabric hairy like a spider's abdomen, the face a hollow mockery like a misshapen tree stump, only guesstimating the proportions of a man. 2 more shots and it climbed back in through a window, a pile of strange colors and textures making their way back in. And then another nick. I raised my gun and it clicked. I was out. He looked down at me with a shocked expression on his face, his pink sunglasses almost rolling off the edge of his nose. "What the hell, Rook?" "Nick?" Without a second thought, he whistled. I could see Reggie bounding through the snow in the distance, along with 2 paramedics who had stopped further down the road. I could hear sirens. "Put that shit away and help me," said Nick. "We gotta move her." It was a group effort, but we got Charlie to an ambulance. As more and more officers and duck officials came back, I could tell everyone had had a rough night. Reggie was busy telling his wife about his heroics over the phone, how he had helped carry a wounded woman to an ambulance. Others were screaming over the radio to check other locations. Some were just looking for ammunition. I ended up leaning against the hood of Squad Car 115 watching the station in the distance. It was getting cold, but I had a feeling I'd never see my favorite jacket again. Nick was sitting in the open driver's seat, leaning out the door with a gas station hot dog in his hands. Seconds later, I could see men dressed in all protective white, lighting up flamethrowers. They were dousing the entire station in fire. Nick poked me with his elbow, and looking back at him, he offered me a candy bar. "I figured you had to skip dinner," he said. "You all right?" "No. I get it." The silence settled. I could hear screeching in the distance as vaguely humanoid shapes ran burning out of the building. There were these popping noises like wet balloons. I sunk my teeth into the candy bar only to realize how dry my mouth was. I could barely taste it. "I think they're moving us to the fire station," Nick continued. "Yeah, we did that a couple years ago during renovations." "I'm gonna need a lot more than a fresh coat of paint for this one," I added. The roof caved in as if to accentuate my point. "Yeah, looks like it." I looked down at my phone and then back at Nick. A thought crossed my mind. "Did you block my number?" "Should I?" "Nah," I said, shaking my head. "Just checking." As the flames reached higher, the screeching stopped. The station was gone. Somewhere in there, my jacket was turning into smoldering coal. I wondered if things would have been different if I had just reported those rubber duck things to the duck right away. The town of Tomskog can really throw you for a loop. The slightest thing can mean the end of the world. But you can't be afraid of everything all the time. You just gotta roll with the punches. And damned if you do, damned if you don't. From April to May, we had to move to the old fire station. The Tomskog Fire Department had long since been dismantled, being absorbed into St. Cloud and the surrounding area, leaving their old station available. It had been used a handful of times as a sort of community space, but there was limited use for an old fire station. It didn't take long to set up shop though, and with the folks from the Duck helping us out, we got the resources that we needed. With Charlie on sick leave, I had to stay on radio duty for the foreseeable future. As we were running short on manpower, I was solely responsible for running the dispatch during the evening shift. We moved off these secure channels though, just in case I wasn't around for a call or two. I'm not going to say those few weeks weren't eventful, but they were eventful in a way that didn't directly affect me. There was some sort of operation to shut down a wind turbine, for example, that seemed to have dire implications. My days weren't that eventful. I took calls, redirected our various units to check them out or not, and made sure to take note of anything out of the ordinary. I also acted as a sort of info hub for the doc, who checked with me every now and then to see if something unusual happened. A couple of people called in about spotting Patrick and his crossbow a couple of times, but he hadn't hunted anyone since the Rose Mill, so we just assured the callers and hung up. But there was that one call that would change my time in Tomskog permanently. I was on my way home after an evening shift, clocking out just after 10 p.m. I was dragging myself to my car, sipping the last few drops of a forest fire tasting Americano. Apparently getting a decent coffee machine wasn't high on the duck list of priorities. I heard a strange noise and stopped, only to realize that it was my phone, my personal one. It hadn't rung in so long that I had forgotten my custom ringtone, Staying Alive by the Bee Gees. I didn't recognize the number. I figured it might be someone from work who needed me for an extra shift. I answered.
Please don't hang up.
That was the first thing they said to me. It sounded like a man, nervous if anything. I stayed quiet, giving the stranger a chance to say his piece.
You're the new girl, aren't you?
He continued.
At the station.
Who is this?
My name's Adam. I'm looking for my daughter.
Well, I'm sure we can help you, I said. But I need you to call during office hours and not to my private phone.
It's not like that. I've talked to the sheriff countless times, but he's not doing anything. But I believe you can.
This is sketchy, Adam. Why would I be able to help when the sheriff can't?
Well, because you're still here to protect and serve.
I stopped in front of my car, rolling my eyes. The taste of burnt coffee stained the roof of my mouth.
I just need a few minutes of your time,
Adam continued.
You'll get a free lunch.
It was the first bribe I'd ever accepted. The next day, I met Adam for lunch at the one downtown cafe that Tomskog offered. They had little blue sunflowers in every window, and they all had that strange illusion where it looked like they turned towards you no matter the angle you looked at. Adam was in his early 50s with thinning blonde hair and a beer belly that poked the edge of the table. He had these naturally sad facial features, like his face had slightly melted. I couldn't imagine him smiling other than sarcastically. He got out of his seat, shook my hand, and asked for my order. I wanted a sandwich and a latte, and he was off like a bullet. When we sat down to eat, he scooched a little closer and he lowered his voice. Thank you for meeting me. I'm sorry if I startled you. I'm still not sure if I can help, but I'm sorry about your daughter. He pulled out a small photo. A young woman with a black, pixie-like haircut and black eyeliner. Her name's Elizabeth, he said, or Ellie, L to some. Oh, she's pretty, I smiled, but I haven't seen her. I know, he nodded, but I think you can help me find her. And we finished our lunches. As people walked by, Adam would lower his voice and look over his shoulder. I could tell that he wasn't comfortable being out in public. I had seen strange people in Tomskog before, and there were a lot of them, so this wasn't out of the ordinary. But something about Adam seemed more genuine. He was weird for a reason. I don't know how much they've told you, he said. Have Hatchet been around? Hatchet, I scoffed. The pharma people. So no. You got any inoculations, any shots? What, like tetanus? You really are new, huh? He attempted a grin, but it came off as a tired squint. Look, he continued, I'll tell you everything I know, but you gotta promise to help me. I can't promise you anything, I don't even know this girl. Just promise that you'll try, please. Looking across the table, there was no way that I could say no. I had a soft spot for people asking nicely, and Adam seemed like an honest guy. At least genuine enough to know when to reach out of his comfort zone. All right, I'll try. I followed Adam to his car and sat down in his passenger seat. We exchanged numbers and he took out a notebook. He had detailed notes about everything related to his daughter, along with names, dates, witness testimonies, and a handful of other details. I got a brief look at his glove compartment when he got his reading glasses. There were a handful of other notebooks in there as well. Elizabeth had survived a fall from a great height. She had broken her legs and cracked her pelvis, but had managed to make it to a nearby road. They had found her next to Frog Lake. How she had managed to fall from such a great height only to end up in the lake was a mystery in and of itself. But that wasn't all. She was exhibiting some unusual symptoms. By the time Adam got to the hospital, she had been quarantined. Early reports indicated something called a sore, but that changed when a new doctor made a second diagnosis. Elizabeth was to be taken to a special clinic upstate, but Adam was never given any details. 3 days later, he was told that she died from respiratory failure. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. "So why do you believe she's still around?" "That first diagnosis," Adam tapped his head. "Sore. That's never mentioned again. Maybe they made a mistake. Well, if they did, why do they refuse to tell me what it is?" He flipped a couple of pages, turning to a section labeled sore. Sudden onset rest event. According to Adam's notes, it was a strange condition that could trigger within 72 hours of exposure, and often when a victim submits to rest. "There have only been a handful of mentions of this," Adam continued. "One is at a prison, corporate sponsored. They get this all the time. The other was an explosion of cases in Jupiter, West Virginia. I'm not seeing much of a connection here, Adam. There's like 6 branches of you know what. Never mind. I'm getting off track here." Grabbing another notebook, he handed it to me. He turned a couple of pages and tapped the page. "There has never been a resolved case of sore. Check the numbers if you want. It's just names. Dozens, all diagnosed but none of them released. They contract this thing and disappear. So it's fatal. No, fatality means closure. There's no record of anyone dying from it either. They die from something else, or they just..." Adam popped his hands, making a poof noise. He looked at me as if expecting some kind of conclusion, but I shook my head at him. "Take this home," Adam sighed. "I got copies, just look it over." "All right," I nodded. "Thanks for lunch." "Yeah." I looked it over later that night, when my job lulled to a halt. I didn't understand what this had to do with me or the Tomscog PD, but if I could put this paranoid man's thoughts to rest, that'd be a win in my book. A stray thought blew through my mind. There was an incident in West Virginia where plenty of folks had come down with sore. I vaguely recalled Nick mentioning Tomscog PD being called there once in response to a geological event, and the dates lined up. Checking the records, I could confirm that yes, the same event that Nick and the others were called out for resulted in one of the largest outbreaks of sore that they had ever seen. It couldn't be a coincidence. Sore was a Tomscog thing, much like the other strange things happening here. Someone had to know something, but chances were that if nobody had told Adam by now, it was for a reason. Either way, I was curious. There was a lot of info in those notebooks. Something about sore being an accelerant rather than an infection in and of itself, and how it didn't introduce anything new or foreign to the human system. Records of strange behaviors, such as people drinking rainwater and throwing up white globs of parasites. And violence. Endless witness statements about violence, cannibalism, and cult-like gatherings. As some of that stuff sent shivers down my spine. There were links to online forums where people talked about their experiences. They never say that it was sore outright, but the dates and the locations lined up. Some of this stuff has been around since the 70s, maybe earlier. I knew it was a bad idea to get involved. I had been an idiot before and it got me in trouble with Nick and the whole station. But I figured maybe just this once, I could help a grieving father and do some real good. And so I texted him. "All right," I wrote. "What do you need?" It was just little things at first. Some names, dates, and locations. Mostly things to corroborate his suspicions about Tomskog PD and their involvement with certain events. And then there were pictures. Mostly pictures of people involved in said events. Nothing harmful, just confirmation of things that Adam had already figured out. It was all to build an idea of what usually happened to folks with SOAR, as a way to point at what might have happened to Elizabeth. It all pointed to this company called Hatchet Pharmaceuticals. They were the final red thread in every case. And doctors associated with Hatchet would make a new diagnosis and the patient would disappear. Either the records would abruptly end, or they would die from something unrelated. It's like they had a list of top 10 most common excuses, and they just repeated the list over and over. There was even a pattern to it. But that's as far as we could get. After a week going over the records, the names, the dates, it all ended with Hatchet. And not even I could open the kind of corporate records that these people held behind closed doors. After that, things got quiet. Adam didn't know where to go from there, and I didn't have any more to give him. My job was business as usual, and there were no major events going down. Yeah, I heard a handful of strangeness every now and then, but there were no all-hands-on-deck kind of deals. Then one night, I got a call from Adam. I met him on a park bench overlooking Frog Lake. It was late and a cold wind was coming in from the north, bringing a faint smell of pine from the woods. Most of the gravel-filled snow slush had made way to early spring flowers, even a couple of budding sunflowers, but it was too early to tell what color they were. I could warrant a guess, though. Adam had brought along a little bag that he held in his arms. He looked tired, more tired than usual. He turned to me with a sigh. "I don't think we're going to get much further," he said. "Thank you for trying, though. Hope I could help." "You did," he nodded. "You really did. Thank you, but, He adjusted his seat a little, clutching the bag. "If you got a new lead, can I count on you to follow it?" "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, I'm here." "Even if I'm not?" I turned to him with a questioning look. He pulled out a water bottle from his pack, rolling it between his hands. "I'll do what I can," I said. "I mean, I don't like people disappearing any more than you do." Adam nodded and took a swig from his water bottle. He cringed a little and handed me a slip of paper. "Meet me here tomorrow," he said, "and bring a friend. Someone you trust." "What for?" "A Hail Mary, courtesy of Mr. Digman." Adam knowingly tapped the side of his bottle and got up from his seat and wandered off. He gave me a final wave, calling back to me. "See you tomorrow." I texted Nick 3 times about it. He got the address and I tried to underline just how important it was. I got no response. I thought about texting Charlie, but I wasn't sure if she'd have my back the same way that Nick did. Also, she was still on sick leave. The thought crossed my mind that I might just cut the crap and talk to the sheriff directly, but I got the impression that he might be involved to a level that might just cause me some trouble if I didn't play my cards right. So I said to hell with it and went by myself. I would have Adam and maybe that would be enough. Let the chips fall where they may. The address that Adam had given me was his house. He lived alone in a 2-bedroom, 1-story house at the west end of town, not too far from Frog Lake. I got there just after my shift. Still no answer from Nick. I had texted Adam a couple of times too, just to see what this was really about. I had been getting a bad feeling about it all day, so I brought my service weapon too. I knocked on his door and waited patiently. After about a minute, I knocked again, looking around. I noticed there was something stuck to the bottom of the door, the corner of a slip of paper. I pulled it out. "Door's open. Go on in," it said. I took out my gun just in case. I opened the door to a pitch-black hallway. I felt around for the light switch, flipped it, and relaxed my shoulders. It was empty. I got in and closed the doors behind me, making sure nothing was following me. This whole ordeal had started to feel like a spy movie, like I was some kind of double agent working behind the scenes. I know that wasn't the case. I was just getting involved with a cold case, that's all. At least that's what I kept telling myself. I noticed another note on the kitchen counter, along with a bottle of wine. It had a nice little blue ribbon tied to it. "Make sure I'm secure and call it in. Then you got a trail to follow. Some wine for your trouble." It was nice wine, but I let it rest on the counter. I looked over the note again. "Adam, what the hell did you do?" It was quiet as a grave. I rounded the corner to the bedroom expecting something horrifying, but it was nothing. Just a knocked over chair and an open window. Looking a little closer, I could tell something was off. There were a pair of handcuffs on the floor ripped open. The chair was broken in 3 different places. The window hadn't been unlocked. Someone had broken it from the inside and climbed out. There were tracks in the slate. Looking back at the scene, I was starting to piece a couple of things together. There was an empty water bottle on the nightstand, the same one that Adam had drunk from the previous night. A trail to follow, making sure that he was secure, broken handcuffs. The idiot had infected himself with something and wanted me to call it in, so I could follow what happened to him. That was his way for me to get an idea of what happened to Elizabeth, and maybe to help her. That's why he had asked the day prior. Except he messed up. He was on the loose doing God knows what, and now I was the only one who knew about it. There was a knock on the front door. I rushed to get it, forgetting to look through the peephole. I opened it just as Nick raised his hand for a second knock. "Hey, this better be important, Rook," he said. "I gotta work in the morning." I may have messed up. He adjusted his pink sunglasses, looking past me. "You got Adam in there?" he asked. "Still looking for his girl, huh? You know him?" "Rook, I know everyone." I sat Nick down by the kitchen wine and explained it all to Nick. I told him how Adam and I had talked, how I had looked into a couple of cases, and how Adam had come up with a plan on his own. I told him that I was suspicious, that maybe Adam had infected himself with something, possibly SOAR, the thing he had talked about. That made Nick perk up. "SOAR? How the hell did he get hold of that?" "I think Digman got it for him." "Jesus, Ace of Base loving Christ. If that's, you sure, he got SOAR." Nick got out of his seat, holding his hands up like everything was a landmine waiting to go off. "No, you got no idea," he continued. "We had to spray down like 100 cars that were even suspected of having caught a whiff of that thing. If we got a real SOAR case on the loose, that's..." Nick pulled out his gun. I followed his lead. "How the duck catches a scent of this, we're dead," he continued. "And that ain't no joke." All right. "Yeah," I nodded. "All right." There were some tracks outside the bedroom window heading southward. We followed them past the frog-like trail and into the woods. The snow slush was clear enough, but we figured out where he was heading by then. Adam was going for the police station. Maybe he didn't know that it had burned down, or maybe he wasn't thinking clearly. As we made our way through the pine woods, I turned to Nick. He had taken off his pink sunglasses, an obvious giveaway that he was nervous as all hell. "So you know about this stuff?" I asked. "Kinda," he admitted. "When they called us in for that outbreak in West Virginia, we were given some outlines." He held up a hand, counting off on his fingers. First, it was airborne. Second, it triggers if you rest for 72 hours. Third, if and when it triggers, there's no telling what'll happen. You seen it though. Nick didn't know what to say. He struggled to find the words, leaning his head to and fro. I guess I did. He explained that there was some sort of unspoken partnership between Hatchet Pharmaceuticals and the doc. Hatchet had the best, if not the only facility that could house people with SOR. They had experts who knew how to study it, and they had people who knew how to diagnose it. But some things you can just tell, Nick explained. You can see it from a mile away. Like most infected people stop to stare at the sky. Creepy. And it's even creepier when you know why. I raised an eyebrow at that. Nick rolled his eyes. Yeah, I talked to a Hatchet guy. He said they're sort of programmed to look in the direction of the source of infection. It's like a magnetic thing. Sort of like a migrating bird. Wait, so the source of up? They look up. It's somewhere up, yeah. Up, I scoffed. That's screwed. As we rounded a small hill, we could see the charred ruins of the old police station. Nick and I stopped for a second. We had lost the tracks some time ago, but there was no doubt in my mind that this was the place. It had been a straight line. Hey, if the duck hears about a case like this, then we're done, Nick said. They can't know about this. Well, then this has been for nothing, Nick. Hey, I'm telling you, if they hear about it, we're done. They'll comb through this guy's entire life and you'll pop up. He'll be put in a box somewhere and you'll join him. And then I'll join him. And then we're just one big happy meal for some sick Hatchet experimental shit and God knows where shitlahoma together. He grabbed my collar and looked me in the eye. If he's infected, no one can ever know. No one, please. I nodded and Nick let go. I didn't like it, but this was the guy I chose to trust. We made our way to the burnout police station. It didn't take long for us to pick up more tracks. They were circling the building as if looking for something. Nick suggested that we split up to cover both sides, but I put my foot down. We were sticking together and that's that. Rounding the corner to the back of the building, you could see the sleet bump up a bit where the old fire door lay flat on the ground. Just a couple of feet ahead, we saw the tracks dip southward. Giving them a wide berth, we stepped sideways, keeping our hands on our weapons. And there he was. It was Adam, just as I had seen him the day prior. He had a cut around his left wrist, probably from struggling his way out of those handcuffs. He didn't look any different physically, but his mannerisms seemed unusual. He was just standing there, wet all the way up to his knees and staring at the sky. You sure he's infected? Nick asked. I ain't putting down an innocent man. How can we be sure? I don't know, Nick admitted. This shit's above my pay grade. He raised his firearm at Adam and I followed his lead. Hey, Nick called out. If you understand me, say something. Adam turned to us, not lowering his head. I could see the corner of his eyes as he stared unblinkingly with childlike wonder up at the sky. Tomskog is one of the few places where you can still see the stars at night, but in that moment I sort of wished I couldn't. I need you to speak, Nick repeated. Say something. Adam took a careful step our way, leaning his head back further, his mouth opened wide, peeling back his lips. And still, he was perfectly balanced and upright. It's as if his head didn't even matter. Last chance. Nothing. Not a glimmer of recognition. Nick looked at me and I nodded. There was nothing we could do. It was the end of the line. And the gun went off. Adam dropped to the ground. Nick took another shot for good measure and holstered his weapon. He was breathing like he had ran a marathon. I had to snap him out of it before he fell into panic. We need bags, I said. Lighter fluid, duct tape, maybe a hacksaw, I don't know. What? If we don't want the duck or Hatchet, whoever to know about this has to go away. And Nick nodded, looking back and forth between me and Adam. He tapped me on the shoulder and ran off to get his car, leaving me with the dead body. And the moment he was gone, I broke down. It felt like I had swallowed a block of ice, turning my blood cold. I shivered. I took out one of my gloves to bite down on because my teeth wouldn't stop chattering. I wanted to pinch my eyes closed and cry, but I forced them open. I forced myself to look. I had to convince myself that this was for the best. If it hadn't been, then Patrick would have put a crossbow bolt in me by now. Maybe. Adam was lying face up, still staring at the sky. I couldn't count the stars reflected in his eyes. Dying from a gunshot to the head is like putting the body on pause. It doesn't look like it's done moving. It just immediately stops what it's doing, as if ready to go again at any second. So when he started moving, I barely noticed it. It took my eyes a moment to adjust to what I was seeing. Adam's head rolled, his eyes looked for me. They weren't focusing, but they were looking my way. Something convulsed its way up his throat. I could count its throbbing movements. Little white strands rolled out of the corner of his mouth, like thick hair just a couple of inches long. They retracted and then rolled out again. It repeated this a couple of times, growing a little longer every time. It was like a hand trying to crawl, like something was using Adam like a snail shell. There was a little pop as a couple of buttons opened on Adam's bloodstained shirt. A couple more strands of white had erupted from his belly button. He was an outie. God, I hate that I know that detail. It's burned into my mind. I aimed my gun at his head, setting off 2 more shots, followed by a third to the chest. I paused, breathed, and took aim at the neck. As my finger reached the trigger, something burned my hand. A string of 3 feet long white strands of white had shot out, digging into my skin. It felt like getting strangled with gasoline-soaked dental floss, this bright, painful burn. I took my gun in my left hand and pulled back. At first, I couldn't lose the strands and ended up pulling Adam along like a dog on a leash. On my second attempt, the strands came loose, curling back into his head, leaving these blue and yellow burn marks on my hand. I backed away, raising my gun for another round, but I couldn't get the fingers in my right hand to move like I wanted them to. There was some sort of paralytic effect going on, and I could feel it spreading through my arm. Aiming with my left hand and trying to block out the pain, I took aim at his neck. And then he moved. And not just a little pull, but a proper full-body jerking motion. He rolled backwards slowly, letting his head move every which way with full abandon, dragging it through the sleet and gravel. He got up on his knees, letting his head roll back to once again look at the stars. I fired. I fired every bullet I had, tearing out his left tendon, his shoulder, his neck, and part of his eye. There was no way that he could survive it, and yet there he was, standing up like it was the most natural thing in the world, only limping slightly from the torn fiber in his foot. I tried to reload, but I dropped my magazine. I wasn't used to doing it with just one hand. By the time I got it, Adam had turned my way, and I raised my gun towards him. He burst into a sprint. I rounded the corner to the burned-out station. I could taste the ashes despite my dry mouth. Part of me just wanted to keep running, thinking that there was no way I couldn't outrun a guy with a torn foot. And then again, it didn't seem to slow him down, it just changed the way that he hobbled. He was fast as hell, almost tripping over himself, using his body weight to go faster in an ever-falling motion. Something was burning in my leg. Whatever had attached to my hand earlier had done a number on me, and I was feeling something all the way down in my leg. Maybe I was the one with a disadvantage. In the moment, I wasn't thinking that clearly. This was a matter of seconds. I decided to take my chances indoors. Sure, the roof had collapsed, but the locker room and the sheriff's office were solid enough. So when Adam came charging around the corner, I rolled my way inside a window. letting my thick jacket absorb the crunch of shattered glass on the floor. I plopped down on the floor, but I couldn't get back up. My right leg wasn't working. It didn't contract. I crawled my way across the floor, but as soon as Adam's shape popped up in the window, I didn't hesitate. I put 6 shots in him. It didn't even slow him down. Long strands of white shot out from a bullet wound in his neck and a web across the walls. It pulled his body inside the building almost reluctantly. His body flopped onto the floor unceremoniously as the strands contracted. I propped myself up against the opposing wall, firing every bullet that I had. The pops echoed against the bare concrete walls, ringing my inner ear with every shake. My hands were stained with ash and sleet, but I could barely feel the cold. With the final click of my gun, Adam was still standing. What remained of his head still leaned back. White strands poked out of every corner of his body, searching blindly for something to grasp. Something like me. I couldn't get up. My leg was done, my right arm too. My breathing was shallow. My heart was pounding, but I could barely feel it. There was just this pumping feeling in my left arm, but nothing in my chest. My trigger finger retracted with every beat of my heart, but there was nothing but empty clicking left. The white strands found the steel tip of my white boot. They curled across the surface but found nothing to grab. They retracted, aiming higher. A couple of them found the edge of my boot and the warmth of my leg. I should have felt a burn as another blue and yellow discoloration formed on my skin. But there was nothing. The strands retracted a third time, now knowing full and well exactly where I was at. I closed my eyes and covered my face with my left hand, leaving my empty gun on the floor. And then another shot rang out. Not a pistol this time, but a shotgun. I opened an eye to spot Nick in the window. He had blown a hole the size of a fist through Adam's shoulder blade. Adam's body collapsed face first next to me, the white strands struggling to shelter themselves. He climbed in through the window, emptying every slug that he had into that body. Using my left hand and leaning against the wall, I managed to get up. I had to jump on one leg and then almost slipped onto a handful of debris, but I made my way across the room. Joining Nick, I looked back only to see the floor around Adam sprawling with these long white ringworm-looking things. Can you make it to the car?" Nick asked. "I think so. You go ahead. I got this." By the time that I had made it back to Nick's car, there was a fire coming from the building. It was a pretty solid cover-up. A fire in a burnt-out building. Nobody would think to look twice. Nick helped me into the passenger seat, excused himself, and stepped outside to throw up. He kept mouthing, "Oh my God," over and over, banging his hand against the hood of the car. It took him a solid 5 minutes or so before he collapsed into the driver's seat. He looked over at me. I didn't know what to say. We just sat there for a minute. "I'm sorry," I said. "I didn't know who to call." "No, it's okay," he said. "You'd be dead if you didn't." "Probably, yeah." We just looked at each other for a moment, trying to let those words sink in. This wasn't empty platitudes. I would actually be dead. "We gotta keep you up for 72 hours, Nick said. "You should be good after that." "I'm infected." "Yeah, I might be too." He revealed a spot on his neck, a blood stain from the shotgun blast. "It might be nothing, I don't know, but we don't want to risk it." "All right, yeah." I tried to close the car door, but my right hand still wasn't working. Nick leaned over and closed it for me, giving me a pat on the shoulder. "Hey, we're gonna be okay," he said. "If we just keep our mouths shut, we'll be okay." "Sorry I got you into this," I sighed. "Really?" "Oh, you don't get to do that," Nick snapped back. "Not this time. If I had told you about this shit earlier, maybe I could have." We calmed down, taking another deep breath. Well, as deep as my lungs permitted. There were no words, so I just raised my left hand at him. "Partners, but for real, right?" He shook my left hand, giving me a solemn nod. And partners, for real,